However, the topic of our discussion right now, I think, is pretty energetic, because we'll be talking about the battery energy storage opportunities and challenges for both PV co-located and standalone power plants. So we've been talking about the energy storage since very morning, and I do feel like since I started working with the energy storage last year, I do feel it's all about energy storage right now, but maybe I'm living in a bubble. So I hope that you will set me straight. I have a very nice panel of friends here who will hopefully set us all straight on this topic. So maybe let's take a round to present ourselves. Okay, maybe I will start, yeah. So once again, I'm Jan Kłoczko. I'm the commercial deputy director in Greenvolt Power Poland, and I'm also directly responsible for the development of our energy storage portfolio.
Thank you, Jan. Like Jan, I'm the second time on the panel today. My name is Hannes Langenhahn. I have co-founded and I run Arakari. We are a developer for grid-scale storage focused on Germany, on ground-mounted, and now more and more looking into co-location, not yet into standalone.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Rely. We're a startup working on optimizing energy storage systems, especially in the health and lifetime of batteries.
Hi, this is Mikel Pino from Exus Management Partners. Exus is a large asset manager with more than 11 gigawatts all across the world, and right now we're becoming an IPP with our own assets, developing both standalone and co-located in our renewable assets.
My name's Dan Connor. I'm CEO of Deus Energy Ventures. Deus is an energy storage platform looking at developing assets and taking them through to construction and operation across European markets. We specialize in standalone storage, so interesting for the conversation today.
Hi everyone, I am Jean-Marc Guillou. I am the technical director for Socomec Group. We are an ESS manufacturer for system and solution, and we are working for both regions, for North America and EMEA business, specifically for CNI activity, renewable integration, and since several years also for EVCI solution.
I'm Rebecca Schuster. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for EDF Renewables Deutschland. Our company provides industrial companies with battery as a service.
Okay, thank you. So we have a very nice panel of experts, and my first question would be, looking at our title, I understand you can see some opportunities. So my question would be, where do you see the real opportunities? Standalone or co-located? And which are the opportunities then in your preferred selection?
Yeah, so I'm sure there are opportunities in both, and I like that we start talking about opportunities and later talk about the challenges. Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm an optimist at heart, and when I look at PV co-located assets, then the battery storage really brings new potential to these assets. So if we look beyond the horizon of Europe, if we look at California, for example, a market where is a very high PV penetration, what they have done in the last 2 to 3 years is just remarkable. So we have seen how quickly these grid-scale batteries can be deployed and brought to the market. And now in the evening hours, the grid-scale batteries take the largest share provided to the load for the grid in California. And this has only happened in 2 or 3 years. So I think some people still underestimate the wave of energy storage that is coming to the market, also to Germany, also to wider Europe. And we better prepare ourselves as an industry to deal with this wave of storage that is coming.
Yeah, I can add to that. So I completely agree. There's a huge wave coming. I think it's quite interesting looking at the conversation around co-location. At the first basic principle, it seems like it makes complete sense to co-locate solar and storage. I understand why, specifically when you're looking at grid connections and making sure that you sweat your grid connection. However, if you look at some markets in Europe where there's a lot of solar, so I take Spain as an example, there's very little storage. And you kind of ask yourself the question of why is that? And then I think the simple answer to that is because storage is not just about energy balancing of solar. There's a lot more to it than that, and there's a lot more opportunity than just simply that arbitrage. And if you look at markets where storage has already been developed at scale, those markets have a range of other problems that storage also solves. So I think that the co-location opportunity is definitely one, but it shouldn't be seen as necessarily the driving force for storage. It's part of the answer, and it's part of the thing that storage can do for markets. But we should be considering things like grid balancing services and other opportunities as well. And actually, we think at DAES that standalone storage can deliver those types of services much more effectively than potentially co-located assets can. So we see a huge amount of opportunity for standalone storage, quite aside from co-located, and think that the co-located question or the opportunity is a bit more complicated than just putting a battery next to a solar farm because it feels like it makes sense. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more, and I think it's not a question of either or. It's definitely a question of and. I mean, depending on where you are in the world or in Europe, either can make more sense. In Germany, we see from our side that standalone batteries make a lot of sense. But this is due to the system that we have. We do have a lot of renewables already in the grid. We need some stability in the grid. We need some flexibility from the consumption side. So what we do with our batteries, we install them on an industrial site without any PV. It's really a standalone battery behind the meter. And it makes a lot of sense because it's helping an industrial customer to manage and steer their consumption, which we absolutely need in Germany. But as said, in other countries, in other places in the world, it might make even more sense co-located.
We will, to answer that, we will somehow to a more fundamental based way of thinking, and I think it's a matter of phases. At the end, we have some countries in which we have more power-related needs, and other ones more energy-related needs. So in countries in which the liquidity is located into ancillary services, or this kind of response type markets, power is the key, not so much energy, but power. So a standalone makes quite a lot of sense. Development is faster. I mean, the capex makes sense, even though you have this relationship of hours which is lower and the capex, specific capex is higher, because the revenues related to power are higher. And in other ones, like for example, you mentioned Spain, we have an extremely good, well, I am Spanish, sorry. we have extremely good grid, so we don't have really needs for fast response, for example, but we are starting to have huge curtailment. This is going to increase more and more and more. So we are losing potentially capability of reducing CO2 footprint. So the answer will come more on the energy management, and that means co-location. No? So, but they have mentioned before that, I don't know who was, that they see Germany as a pure arbitrage market in the future. And I think so, but not just Germany. I think that the evolution of the batteries will go to a point in which the LCOS will decrease quite a lot because of the technical performance increase plus CapEx reduction. So at a certain point, just by doing arbitrage, it should be enough. So for me, probably, countries with power needs, best is king, but the future goes 100% to co-location.
Okay.
Maybe I can add to that. Yeah, so I agree. So we need both co-location and standalone. So there is no one or the other. But at the same time, we see there is a lot of opportunities at the moment in some countries. Of course, like we cannot generalize everything on the standalone batteries. So there's a lot of opportunity and flexibility that we can use with standalone batteries rather than co-located. So in co-located, we're starting to have some challenges, especially also with regulations, etc. So we so we see at the moment there's a lot of open doors for standalone batteries.
Okay, and for me, the main position also is to define the quality of the grid. When we are talking about battery energy storage system, first we are talking about flexibility. And if you analyze a part of grid in Europe, we are quite stable. So in fact, when you analyze our objective in terms of PV introduction, it's really, really ambitious. And more we are talking about also decentralization of the production. So it means we need to have the capability, locally speaking, to store and to deliver at the right time the energy. So for me, the PV co-located solution with storage is quite key, even if we have a strong grid and right quality grid. I developed also some project in French overseas, for example. In this case, we need to have also a storage solution in order to provide smoothing for the PV. It's important for this kind of grid to optimize and to have the right forecast in terms of production, because above 30% of renewable integration inside this kind of island, it's quite complex to manage intermittent activity. So it means the storage solution could optimize this part of renewable integration due to smoothing activity, but also time shifting activity. Because as you know, PV production, the highest production is at 12 p.m. and it's preferable sometimes to have the right moment of consumption, also between 7 to 9 p.m. And due to that, we have a time shifting application also. So clearly it depends on the quality of the grid, but for both activity, for poor and right quality of the grid, it's important to have access to a storage solution.
Okay, you touched upon something which I find very important, because one thing that is a big elephant in the room, I would say, from the very morning of our discussion is the business case. And in terms of batteries, the business case is in revenue stacking as of today, yes? And also my gut feeling is that the revenue stacking, once you start to do it, it's not set in stone, because it will change from year to year. You will have, in other words, when you build up your PV or wind installations, the only thing you cared about was the demand for energy. Right now, you have to juggle the demands for different things, and all the demands are dynamic. Do you think it's more of an opportunity or a challenge?
Yeah, again, I see this as an opportunity, because what is the alternative option for a pure EV asset? During the midday hours, the energy will not be worth as much. And then at night, when everybody gets at home and starts the appliances, then there is a larger demand for load. This is clearly what we see in other markets. I mentioned California, and now in Germany we see the duck curve. I'm sure most of you have heard of it. And yeah, traditionally this shifting from midday to evening hours has been done by pumped hydro, for example. And I really see a clear future where this is more and more being done by co-located assets. So for me, definitely an opportunity. And I think the PV assets that are not embracing it now, already during development, they may find themselves in a bit of a weaker position going forward.
I would also agree on that, so especially on the dynamic pricing part. So the dynamic pricing, I think, it will always be an opportunity, because it's there just for the price is high for a reason, the prices are low for a reason. So by leveraging this, it can only become an opportunity rather than a challenge.
For me, it is really a challenge. I'm sorry. But when they have been talking in the previous panel about bankability, I think that's why they say that right now co-location is already bankable. Because at the end, you're going to have a big part of your revenue stacking coming from time shifting. So somehow you put quite a lot of certainty in how do you build your revenue stacking. But if we go to the traditional way in which we have been financing assets, for the standalone BESS, the weight of the different revenue sources in the revenue stacking will change from, I don't want to say from one year to another one, but probably in 3-4 years will be completely different. We have seen that already in the UK. So we are quite used to large tenors when it comes to how do we introduce in our models the incomes. PPAs of 10, even 15 years, this is no longer available. This is not going to happen with BESS. It's extremely difficult. So when it comes to standalone BESS, to make them bankable is going to be really, really something difficult. So I see a real challenge. Of course, an opportunity in case you are the trader, but I mean, a lot of risk there.
I think I'm going to disagree. So I suppose I think at the moment there are a number of revenue streams available in lots of different markets that can be bankable. They can be support schemes or capacity type payments. On top of that, we've seen it in the UK, and we see it propagating throughout European markets that floors and other types of revenue certainty structures are available over long term as well in those markets. Those types of structures, they tend to just give you a guarantee over like intrinsic trading revenues anyway. So whether there's that much value to them or not is up for debate. If you have the right funder and you have the right perspective on the market, then you don't necessarily need those. The parallel I draw is that I don't think anyone here has ever done a PPA where they haven't taken imbalance risk, or that they've allowed all their imbalance to go to market, okay? Because they're worried about what those prices will be. And effectively, a battery is just the flip of that. So rather than mitigating that risk through trading, through a supplier, you're actually just saying, no, I like that risk, and I want to access it, and I want to access the value that it generates. So in the same token that you would want to de-risk yourself from price spikes, highs and lows in the market through your PPA structures, you could also say for a battery that actually you want to access those opportunities. The difference is, of course, that the imbalance price is a small part of your PPA consideration and your solar financing, whereas for the battery, it's everything. But if you're comfortable with that perspective, then actually you can have an extremely good business case. And I'd almost say that in a market where there aren't, the requirement for batteries, the gigawatts that are needed, is not as much as it is for solar or for wind. It's a subset, almost like a secondary, and the volumes are a little bit lower. That if there's some people that see it as a challenge, that just means for the people that see it as an opportunity, there's a lot more value to be had because you don't have a flood of assets coming into that market. So I think if you believe it as an opportunity and you really see that volatility is exciting for you as an investor, then there's a huge amount of value to be had for the exact reason that some other people see it as a challenge.
For me, it's clearly an opportunity, but for today, I prefer to discuss about challenge. Because in case of standalone application or only one usage of the batteries, it's quite easy to define the life cycle of the batteries on the cost impact of the system. When you are introducing a mixed of application, you are decreasing the lifetime of the batteries. Which impact by application you will have on the system, it's quite difficult to define it. For instance, we are talking about artificial intelligence in order to have a sort of predictive analysis for the impact of new application on the batteries, but this is quite difficult to define at the beginning of the project. To take commitment, because when we are talking about bankability, we are talking about 10, 15, 20 years of warranties. In this case, it's quite difficult to take this part of commitment. If you stack again at short-term level, it's a right position, but at long-term level, with the life cycle, it's quite difficult to take this position. And for me, it's really a challenge to mix the right energy management system also with the right optimization of the battery usage.
Well, I take the stance again of both. It's clearly a challenge and an opportunity. I mean, challenge, what you said. It's very complex to operate two different cases. And yes, the lifetime, how about the cycling? It's a challenge for sure. Yeah, and we are operating behind the meter and front of the meter. That brings an extra challenge. But it is also clearly an opportunity. For us, as an example, we installed a battery north of Germany, I think 2018, at an aluminium company with two use cases. One is peak shaving and the other one is FCR, so primary reserve. And then came the energy crisis, and as you may know, I mean, peak shaving, you need to have high peaks for it to be profitable. If there are no peaks, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then the energy crisis came, and this company couldn't produce as much anymore to save costs and all. So the battery was hardly in operation for peak shaving, but then we could use it more for the FCR. And as you know, in those times, the FCR prices were super high. So our business case worked out perfectly. I mean, the opposite way we had expected, but the money at the end was okay. And so clearly an opportunity from experience. Yeah.
Okay, great. Just before we move on to challenges, I just wanted to make a buffer question. So to be a bit more, that's something that bugs me for quite a long time. I was wondering, because a few years ago, the situation was that everybody used energy and nobody was interested in who's doing it in what way. Yeah? You just had your utility who provided the energy and nobody asked any question. It was the most boring business possible. Then suddenly, well, the crisis hit and the renewables came in. We started to get distributed energy sourcing. And suddenly everybody got interested in energy. And now also, the prosumers appeared, et cetera, and suddenly it became the talk of the town. And right now we're getting into batteries. And for me, like personally, this will be a big game changer mentally. Because on one hand, you can get a lot of new players, like, for example, CNI, et cetera. These guys will suddenly start to manage their own energy. On the other hand, energy management is so much more difficult than the energy storage management is so much more difficult than just sales of energy, that I can see the other trend coming in. The people who are starting to develop batteries, they were quite well versed in the energy market already, but because they have now to juggle between 4 revenue streams, they just say, oh, I just need an optimizer. I don't care what's happening there, So on one hand, we can go in the direction where we get more players in the market and more entities who will be conscious how this market is operating, which would be, from my point of view, it would be very interesting and very good. On the other hand, it might get so complex that people who develop and build and operate batteries will feel it's overwhelming, and we will have just a few specialized units who will service the whole market, which is, according to you, which one is the option that will take place?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a great question. And when I speak about this, I like to compare it again with PV. And here, what we have seen over the last decade or so is the democratization of the energy generation. Yeah, let's think about that. 20 years ago, the energy generation was in the hands of maybe 4 or 5 players. Now we have more than 4 million PV generators in Germany alone. And personally, I expect similar things going to happen on the storage side. As Rebecca said, they're already working with the C&I companies, and now they have a behind-the-meter storage. And I think this trend is unstoppable. So we're going to see the democratization also for the energy storage. And to the second part of your question, I think the complexities and this sort of thing, this will be worked out, and I think we will have a value chain where there are specialized players that have maybe only standalone batteries, and then other specialized players who care about the optimization and have a nice software. So I think the market will respond to that, but yeah, I think it's great. We are democratizing not only the energy generation, but also the energy storage.
Yeah, I agree. I partially agree on the solar. I feel like energy storage is a little bit more complex. So I feel are going to be a little bit less players probably than in the solar industry, as it's going to be much more specialized in the energy storage. But definitely there must be new players coming in that will help manage all these problems and challenges that are coming, because this is not something that, especially a company maybe that is already working with solar or wind, that they are specialized in that. They have a lot of challenges in then understanding how the energy storage market can work, how to operate and manage the battery itself. So I see that the trend of new players coming in, especially in the optimization part, is going to be something that is going to grow a lot in the future. But at the same time, I believe probably not as much as in the solar industry, as the knowledge is much more specialized and deep.
Yeah, maybe just quickly responding to that. The reality that we're seeing in Germany, and maybe Rebecca has some more numbers on that, but the vast majority of energy storage, I think we have 14, 15 gigawatt right now, or gigawatt hours, and that is in the residential. So that's like countering a bit your point. So we already have thousands and hundreds of thousands of energy storage users, and the large scale and the CNI needs to catch up.
I think that talking about not only about the storage but also about energy itself, I think that the market is moving to a situation in which there are going to be like two opposite markets happening at the same time. We have on the one hand the regulation coming from Europe, in which they want to connect all the different countries in a single market, which will be the continuous market, not only talking about the spot, but also talking about ancillary services, for example. So I do see really big assets of hundreds or megawatts co-located renewable plus storage participating in this kind of markets. I mean, quite liquid, quite big, and probably will be with this kind of optimization coming from the big utilities with just 3 revenues lines really specialized. And in the same time, happening really in the same time, a really democratized, really delocalized market, residential, CNI, and so in which we will have the flexibility coming not only from storage and from solar self-consumption, but also from demand itself. Demand will be flexible. And probably those ones are going to be more local markets, flexibility markets related to regulating small leaps or small responses related to frequency response or whatever, more locally in the cities. So I think that it's going to be a certain split between big and more utility scale-like assets, plus more distributed, more flexible with aggregators and so kind of market.
I think, so if we look at kind of what happened in the UK, just as a market that's been going for a number of years, we saw initially there were a few optimizers, a few kind of traders who were interested in storage. That has grown. That's grown massively, and now there are maybe 50 different optimizers in the market. There's a huge number of people, so many optimizers that there's leaderboards comparing their various performances, right? Now, that's really interesting because actually I don't think the problem of optimization, if you take the overall problems that are considered in some various different tech industries and verticals, those problems are probably multiple times more complicated than actually the optimization of a battery. So what we do is we invite people into our community of energy storage of batteries who have interesting technical or interesting computational approaches to solving these problems. And I think it actually invites people into the industry because they see that solving a complex problem like the optimization of storage can generate a lot of value. And actually there's lots and lots of different ways that you can go about doing it. So I think it really does invite people into the industry. But energy storage, as compared to some maybe solar and wind, you're not just dealing with arbitrage and needing to understand the energy market, you're also needing to understand grid, and you're needing to understand balancing, which are things that maybe some people haven't been into as much previously. It kind of means that, and we're amongst friends here, that you're kind of a bit more of an energy nerd, I'd say, if you're kind of into storage, right? Like you're kind of into it a bit more. And that can be an opportunity because it means that for people that aren't into it or don't understand it as well, there's an opportunity for you to understand it better and then to make the right decisions. But also it can be a bit of a barrier to entry. And so I think it's important that we consider how we bring new people into this community and make sure that they have that interest in energy and want to understand it better. I think that happens naturally through global considerations and decarbonisation issues, but energy storage is that next step, I think, for some people, extra bits to understand, extra nuances around how to trade it, at least from a trading and markets perspective. So it is a challenge to consider as well.
Thank you. Yes, we are following the same learning curve as the photovoltaic by the past. But the landscape of the battery energy storage, it's quite more difficult for me because we are facing about several new positions in terms of system integrator. If you know the position of battery manufacturers, they are integrating now also the PCS and soon also the energy management system. And you have some developer with the possibility also to decrease the position at battery level. So it means more and more you have some difficulty to define the right business model and position. And as a system integrator now, you need to manage the hardware part, easily, but also the software part. And specifically for CNI business, I am more connecting on that case for industrial company, but more and more they want to have access to a greener production, but their knowledge, it's quite limited in terms of technology. If you compare for a large-scale application, you are discussing with a stronger company for PV integration, and it's really specialist. So it's quite easy to define with them which solution could fit. But for industrial company, it's more difficult for them because their objective is really to reduce their consumption, or to optimize and to be greener, in fact. And the storage solution is the key for them, but you need to optimize your position at different levels for the sales and for the pre-sales activity also. And at the end, to be greener, it's possible to add batteries. Then it's also possible to provide a resilience operation and backup solution. And for industrial company, this is key also in terms of continuity of services. For Europe, but also in US and in California, when you have to manage some CNI business, it's mandatory to provide resilience operation. So technically speaking, for the power converter, it's not the same. So you need to manage perfectly well this part of solution on equipment. And this, for me, is quite a challenge for CNI business because you need to manage PV integration, but also backup capabilities.
For this question, I think, I mean, of how many players, and I think really the PV was much more a shift in my view, and especially to what you said, Hannes, out of few big players, suddenly we have millions of players. For the battery storage, I don't see that really because we are all electricity consumer. We are already somehow a player in this network, in the system. So I don't see the big change. I see it absolutely as an opportunity because with the storage we give, now especially CNI, we give them tools in their hand how to really handle and manage their loads. So they can become more active, but that's absolutely necessary. And I mean, in terms of, yes, might it be too complex or may it create a chaos? I mean, in Germany, we have a highly regulated market. I mean, it's not that everybody can just play around with their storage and do whatever. I mean, there are some regulations. We have to have all the permitting and all, and then it will still be watched. So I see it as an opportunity, giving industrial companies tools in their hand how to handle their loads.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you all. Rebecca, thank you for what you said, because we can now smoothly move to the challenges. And as you've mentioned, the regulations. What I see is that energy storage is like a really flexible asset, both in terms of energy flexibility, but also in terms of services it can provide to the energy market. You know, arbitrage, peak shaving, whatever. However, I would say you're not limited only by your imagination and your I would say greed, but you're also limited by how the market is perceived by the regulator. Yeah. So at the end of the day, what I can see is that in every country the regulator sees batteries as something slightly different, and the regulations stem from that. And at the end of the day, they limit your playing field. So, for example, in Poland, for quite a long while, the regulator saw battery storage as a sort of a PV that can suck energy from the grid. So it took, from my point of view, it takes, I would say, the most difficult and the most long-term job is to make the regulator understand what is actually this technology, and to be somehow aligned with also the grid operator, who at the end of the day is one of the important players in this game. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I agree. Challenges come from regulation. Yeah, definitely the case, and we had similar things in Germany. I'm not an expert, but we had this sort of double taxation type of thing. There was a long discussion in the industry and with the regulators in terms of definition. What exactly is a battery storage? And at some point this gets worked out, but regulators are usually not the fastest. And then, yeah, as a developer in Germany, we have some interesting challenges. For example, in Germany, we have 900 distribution grid operators. which, in theory, they should all play by the same rules and so on, but in practice, they don't. And yeah, this is a challenge. But again, there are so many challenges, and there were with PV, and it's our responsibility in the industry to find solutions to these challenges. But the challenges are manifold, and I give this to my panelists.
Should I directly comment? I mean, we face a lot of regulation issues, especially with the complexity of 900, having to deal with 900 DSOs, and yes, they are very different. You have very small, like, based in villages, DSOs, and then you have the big ones who cover a lot of regions. All of them are different, and sometimes it's even if you talk to two people of the same DSO, they give you different answers when it comes to battery storage and connecting a storage into their grid. So, I mean, there is a lot of education work that needs to be still done, which I think is fine, and we all can do it from a like government and making the laws perspective. I feel that battery has been for the last years like the neglected, forgotten, I don't know, stepchild, which, I mean, now everybody says, how important are batteries? We need them in our grid. How can we use the PV properly? But I mean, there has been no regulation put in place over the last years. I mean, even in the long-term scenario of the German government, they don't expect any storage to be built. And I mean, now they said, no, of course, that was wrong, and we are working on our long-term scenarios. But it has not been considered, and it has been made very difficult to really connect batteries to the grid. So there needs to be some work from the regulatory side, but of course, it's our responsibility to do the lobbying, to do the explanation and the education. And yeah, that's what we are there for.
I think that one of the points is that we have reached a point in which technology evolves extremely fast, so regulation comes much slower than the technology. So we are at a point in which batteries can give many, many services to the grid that in some countries are not even considered because, I mean, it's so new, you know what I mean? And this matches quite a lot also with how how people relate to the technology. So for example, we in Spain, we are starting to face the situation in which many small villages that have not seen a battery, I mean, they have no idea what a battery is, and they compare a stationary system, a big BESS, with a scooter, electric scooter, or these kind of things that, there is fire hazard, there is a lot of noise, we don't want them in our village, you know? And that's quite difficult because technology evolves extremely fast. So for me, education is key. Absolutely key. We need to become ourselves teachers somehow, and we need to train the people into this. And also, I think that the more the countries start thinking of like a single energy system instead of countries, and regulation are more similar between the different countries, the better for the integration of technology and for the green transition also.
Yeah, I think I agree with what a lot of the panelists have said already, that storage is neither really a true consumer nor a true generator, or at the same time it's both, right? So it's very difficult, and it is new and it needs to be considered. And in markets where it hasn't been considered as its own asset class, you end up with loads and loads of problems. So there's lots of challenges. There's things like double charging, so you create artificial spreads. There's things specifically around co-location, like about how do you deliver a power service if you're co-located with something else that has a variable power output, like a solar or a wind farm. These are complexities, and so there's one level to make storage work at all in a market, and the second level is then how do you deal with some of these co-location issues and multiple asset classes at one point of connection, and those are extra challenges too. So I think there's a lot of challenge there, absolutely. But I don't want to be too negative about it, because if you take a step back from it and you think about the nature of those challenges, all of them are just artificial constructions based on the fact that storage hasn't been considered yet. None of these are things that have been thought through and decided as an approach for storage, that we want to do this double charging, where we want to take this approach. And if you believe in storage as part of the energy transition and part of the solution, then these things will inevitably change, right? You have to remove double charging, because otherwise, or charging basically final consumption taxes and fees on storage assets, because if you don't, then you're going to have double recovery because you'll charge your battery, the energy will leave the battery, it will then be consumed by someone else, they'll charge them again. That just doesn't work. You also create artificial spreads in markets where you need a bigger spread in energy prices to manage these extra time of use costs. So your batteries aren't doing an efficient job of balancing your system. So all of these things, they are challenges at the moment. They will be removed in time. It's just about how confident you are about how soon they've been removed, and therefore how early do you go into that market, and are you willing to take some risk on some of those, or do you want all of them to be resolved before you build your project? Because if you want the latter, you might make a return, but you probably won't make as much of a return as someone that took a bit of a punt a little bit earlier, right? So there's a bit of a blend there between how much risk you want to take about when these things will be resolved. I don't think it's about whether they'll be resolved or not.
In my experience from different conversation with a lot of players in different markets, regulation's always been like a huge problem. Every time talking about challenges, there's always something about the grid connection or the way you can operate the battery and how different it is and how difficult it is to penetrate new markets. For example, I remember like some big players didn't want to enter in Italy yet because there was a lot of problems in regulations and how the regulation will evolve in the future, etc. So there's a lot of challenges into actually also in the investment in the energy storage. So we need more investment in storage. We need more storage to be installed, but the regulations are kind of slowing this down. And this is something that needs to be changed. I think I think you also mentioned something like something needs to be unified so that we can invest in different places without a lot of these obstacles. And on the other side, challenges also on the operational side on how we can use the battery. So, for example, using the battery only on one market because we cannot maybe use the battery to get power from the grid or sell power to the grid. That poses a lot of challenges on the use cases and therefore on the revenues that we can get from the storage. And of course, if there is less revenue in the storage, we're also going to have less investment in storage.
Yes, thank you. And I'm full aligned with my colleague also. We need to have an education part. We need to educate our government. Each time in Europe, it's quite easy for them to define the right plan for 2050. The plan is this one, but how to execute this is each time a complex point. If you analyze the position in USA again, with IRA, it's quite clear. They put on the table 500 billion. Half of this part is dedicated to BESS for industrialization of the supply chain, for the education part, and also for the part of the business. This is clear. You have the global plan on the execution. And we have a complete lack in Europe for that. It's quite difficult. With ease, we are trying to put in place and to have a part of lobby, but it's really complex to advance again.
Exactly. So, guys, before we move on to asking the audience whether they have any questions, I would like to ask the last question to all of you. And I would like the audience to if you want to start your own energy storage business, listen very closely because the question will be, I mean, we have a very good representation of people who know what they're doing in batteries in different walks of life. Like we have technology, we have development, we have investing, etc. So my question would be, apart from regulations, because we can all complain about regulations, but in your line of work, what do you see as the biggest challenge outside of the regulations?
Yeah, for me as a developer, it's the technology is not a challenge because this is proven technology. It works so well in other markets and it already works in Germany, so we can take that off. I would say it's working with the investor community, with the lender community, because this technology is still so new in the energy world. Let's not forget, over the last 10 years, the prices for lithium-ion cells have dropped like 90%, and this has enabled all this. So yeah, for us, it's working with the investors and the lenders, so they embrace this and they understand how to put this in their financial models, Excel spreadsheets in the end. And let's face it, this is what drives the investment decisions and the green light or red light from the banks. And this is where we have a lot of work to do because this is still so new and they sometimes don't know which assumptions to to put in. So for us as a developer, this is, I would say the largest challenge.
Yeah, on our side, what the biggest challenge we see is actually the lack of knowledge on the energy storage and how to operate energy storage. Sometimes energy storage is taken maybe like any other renewable asset and just operated to get as much revenue as you can. But in reality, it's not that simple. There is so much more that happens to the battery. So challenges in terms of lifetime of the battery, how the battery degrades, and also actually getting parameters from the battery. That sounds so simple, but in the end, it's not that. So there's a lot of problems that you get into into accuracy of the parameters from the battery and how to use this. But mainly the main problem is how to operate then correctly the battery in a way that you are not degrading it super fast, but still get your revenues.
For me, quite related to what Hans said. I mean, at the end, you cannot take regulation for the formula from the formula because everything is quite related. But for me, probably is valuation. How do you evaluate an asset? Because all the energy sector is quite divided into really, really well-defined steps, and there are not many players doing all the steps themselves. So you have the developers developing, then selling, then IPP, then you have EPC, then you have operators, asset managers, and blah, blah, blah. So from each one to the other one, you need to certain finance, you need certain valuation, you need to build models at the end. And right now it's not so easy to evaluate which is the price for an asset. So when it comes to the first step from developers to IPPs, that's really a nightmare.
So I think maybe a little bit contrary to what some people have said, I think that in our experience, there absolutely are funders out there that are looking to construct projects and are willing and comfortable with the risk associated with volatility, albeit maybe managed with some offtake structures, those kinds of things. I think there's been a lot of thinking done around that, and a lot of the thinking that I've seen for global counterparties that maybe have done more in some other markets and now are bringing that into their other European trading counterparties and other structures. So I think there's quite a lot of traders there who maybe they don't have the track record that they can show you of 3 years of proof, but absolutely they do know what they're doing. We also see funders that are willing to invest. The biggest challenge from my perspective is low quality speculative development, because I see a lot of people out there that think storage is easy and it's not. And a lot of people who think that they can just get a grid connection and then sell it for a significant premium, and that is storage projects. Now, that doesn't work. That's not efficient for an end consumer. We are all end consumers. We don't want people taking value out of this process without adding significant value as part of that. So the biggest challenge for me is people that think that this activity is easy and take a more speculative approach to secure grid connections. Earlier we heard about, I think, was it 180 gigawatts worth of grid applications in Germany, right? This is not really thought through stuff. This is very speculative, this is land grabbing, and this is the kind of thing that would prevent a serious player that was starting out in this room today from being able to make a significant impact in the market and being able to develop a project. You need to have access to the grid, otherwise you have nothing. Right, so this is the biggest challenge and something that does need to be solved, whether that's through bonds and grid deposits, specific timelines for people to actually execute projects and take things into construction. Various different mechanisms can be in place, but those need to happen to kind of winkle out the people that are trying to take a speculative approach to something that is critical grid infrastructure and a very important part of the energy transition.
Okay, sorry, and how do we solve that?
Grid deposits, bid bonds, timelines for people to actually build projects when they get grid connections.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, for me, the biggest challenge will remain, in fact, the right supply chain for the batteries in Europe. We are facing two big issues on this part. We need to put in place the right position and also to have the right position in terms of development of the battery technology. For instance, we are all working with LFP batteries, with a safe test solution, for instance, but we need to define the way to develop another technology. We are discussing about sodium-ion for the future, but this needs to be in place in order to have access to the right raw material. And this is key Again, in US, they put in place the right solution, so it means now they want to have access to US-made batteries. In Europe, we need to do the same, and we need to have access to the right technology for the future.
I think I agree with all of the answers before. I mean, for me, really, the regulatory challenge is the hardest, and there's hardly anything that
Okay, it gives you sleepless nights, yes?
Yeah, exactly. So this is really the hardest. I mean, what I see is, I mean, also supply chain getting, of course, a good battery for not too much money makes, of course, a business case for sure. Also, people. I mean, labor shortage is a problem in Germany. Having the right people in getting them to our team or doing the works. I mean, that's definitely a challenge that we are facing. I cannot solve it really, except for getting people over and helping. But I think these are the main challenges. And yes, what Laura said as well, the lack of knowledge. There is still a lot of education necessary to not only the regulation bodies, but also then, of course, our partners, our customers, the industry, to explain what exactly is happening, what they can do. I think that's a key challenge that we are facing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Very thoughtful contributions. And 3 out of 6 people mentioned lack of knowledge. So guys, if you want to increase your knowledge now, this is one in a lifetime opportunity to get ahead of the learning curve and ask a question to our panel of renowned experts, world class. So I can see already a number of people.
Hi. More than a question, I want to take away some of your fears. Your business enemy is the fossil fuels, and the more batteries will be on the market, the more expensive will be the minimum price they will sell to, because they will have fewer hours to work with, and the more this happens, the higher the price they will sell, and the more profit your batteries will do, until the system just does not accept any fossil. And if you look at the baseline, which is maybe 3 cents in Northern Europe for photovoltaic and 3 cents, 4 cents maximum for battery added cost on top for the next couple of years, the world in Europe can work with 5, 6, 7 cent overall cost of energy. So you should not be so worried about the long term, I think, and every megawatt hour built in 5-10 years will have a very good business case. So I think it's very clear that all of those gigawatts that want to connect to the grid have a reason, have a very good reason.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're preaching to the what's the saying? I don't know.
Preaching to the converted. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So thank you for this contribution. Certainly, Rebecca will sleep better tonight, and I will sleep too. Okay.
Yeah, it works. First, thank you very much for the talk. It was really insightful, this one. Before asking my question, I wanted to really appreciate the point that Mikkel did, separating the power component to focus on standalone batteries and the energy component to focus on co-location. And in this regard, my question goes direction standalone. We are focusing here on ancillary services, on arbitrage, on all the revenue stacking that we can get from working on standalone. The pie may increase as the renewable integration increases, but at the same time, maybe, but at the same time, loads of actors will recognize this, will try to enter the market, and therefore the price that we may get from that market may get lower progressively year by year. My question here goes to Daniel, although anybody can answer, just because you're the biggest advocate in the group, I think, for standalone. Mm-hmm. What would you tell a risk-averse investor, for example, if you have to defend this case? If after, for instance, 5 years, you start seeing that the amount of players that have entered the market start making the case not so extremely profitable anymore, and you still have to get any return on investment based on the whole lifetime of the battery?
I understand. Thanks for the question. So the answer is quite simple, is that I think you're creating a distinction between a power and energy use case as between standalone and co-located. Now, a standalone battery can do both power and energy, right? And in efficient markets, where there are no additional costs on a time of use basis for an asset to charge from the grid as to charge from a co-located renewable source, which is generally true and is the direction of travel in most markets, then actually it makes no difference where the power comes from. So in the UK, for example, and actually in some other markets that we look at as well, it's the same price. Okay, so the energy that you could sell your solar generation for is the same price as the power that you could procure from the market. There's a tiny bit of efficiency. That's the only real difference, right, from my perspective, and that's how I think this will develop over time. So in terms of all the markets that are available for co-located and for standalone, they're the same. The only differential, I would say, is that the policy for being able to deliver power services with a standalone asset will come after the policy for being able to, for co-located assets will come after standalone. So actually there'll be a period of time where you'll be able to deliver grid services, both active power services, but also non-active power, so reactive power, voltage control, all of these kinds of things, services with standalone batteries that you won't be able to deliver with co-located because the policy won't be in place to allow for the various different sub-metering structures that need to happen. This is what we've seen in the UK. On that basis, the business case for standalone is at least as good as co-located in terms of the markets it can access and the enduring value. The only challenge to that would be in a scenario where there was a difference between the cost that you could import power from the grid from and that you could use, that you could access from your co-located renewable source, which is true in some markets at the moment, but I don't expect that to be the case, certainly over the 15, 20 years that we're talking about for a return on investment.
Two super fast points. The first one for Daniel, as making a little bit of challenge. For me, if we go to, let's say, a super nice scenario in which regulation is pretty clear for both standalone and co-location, since if you, for example, hybridize DC, you are sharing a lot of infrastructure all across the asset. So your LCOS of the euros per megawatt hour stored will be lower in co-location compared to standalone. So at certain point, your cost of opportunity of storing energy will be lower with co-location than standalone. And going back to your question, one of the things that we are looking as a plan B, for example, in the UK, in which we have seen that the liquidity for the power-related markets is starting to decrease, even it's been absolutely cannibalized at a certain point right now, is that at certain point there will be a need for long duration storage. So you can buy a 1 hour, 2 hour system to repower it to 8 hours or whatever. I mean, and with the CapEx reduction, talking back to the LFP will be the king for now to 10, 20 years. I mean, there's not going to be a plan B on technology that will rise as fast and with such a big and dramatic cost reduction. So, I mean, I think we have LFP for many years. You can repower to 8 hours and to change the business case to start moving energy. And since you have already deployed quite a lot of money, your cost of opportunity is already in place.
Just very, very quickly, to go back on that point, the one thing I want to say about connecting in DC is that if you do that, then it's very difficult to deliver AC services to the grid. So in connecting to on a DC basis, it means that you're looking at an energy arbitrage market, which is fine, but it may prevent you, at least in the first instance, and policy and regulation would need to progress over time in order for it to be able to accommodate you from delivering any power services, because your power would be coupled with your with the renewable generation as well. We've looked at this a lot in some markets, and I've contracted for it, co-located assets. And there's a lot of complexity when it comes to how you manage things like solar PPAs alongside battery optimization. And you need to make sure, really, the goal and the hope is that you have one counterparty who can deliver both of those services. I've started to see some optimizers partnering with people who can offer long-term PPAs, who effectively have the financial backing to make bankable PPAs for renewable projects. And we need a lot more of this in order for one counterparty to be able to manage the optimization problem, because that's another challenge with co-location is, that you have two assets that need to make sense in their own right, and blending them together is not always additive. It can be a challenge as well.
And we have come to the end of our time, some time ago already. So thank you very much. I hope you have many more questions and you will ask them to our experts over a coffee or maybe later during the party. So I would like to thank you for all your valuable contributions. I enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed that too.